Hi, you're listening to Boggy Talk, Faith Conversations in the Mud, a resource of Church on Bayshore.
Hey, welcome to Boggy Talk. It's we have a little fun setup in the studio today. So our audio interface wasn't working for multiple microphones. So James and I are sharing a microphone because we have a very special guest joining us, the very, very Right Reverend Jeff Bliss.
Oh, well, thank you.
Who's a member here at
You're
Church.
ordained? You're ordained?
Not yet.
I just like to make stuff up. So.
Okay.
But so he's here joining us today as we talk about vision and really just our own lives and how we carry God's vision, building off of last week. But before we dive into talking to Jeff, how are you doing, James?
Well, thank you for asking, Justin. So first of all, you sound so fancy when you said audio interface.
That's right.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
You could have just said the mics aren't working, and
Yeah.
but that made you sound way more like technical and like you know what you're doing. Also, both of our breaths smell strong like coffee.
Yeah.
So I smell yours, and you probably smell mine. But I'm great, man. I'm great. It's today, February what? It's the day after President's Day.
know.
I know that.
Yeah.
February 20th, right? Yeah, February 20th.
We'll go with that.
Yeah, I'm good, man.
Yeah.
I don't know why I had to know the date to know that I'm good, but I had to
for
get
it.
my bearings. So
right.
we're recording this like moments before it drops. So yeah. How are you, Justin?
Hey, thanks for the microphone. This is James's dream come true. Like, don't give Justin the mic. I'm just kidding. What? I'm just kidding. I'm doing well. You know, all weekend we were building a fence in our backyard, and so my hands are a little torn up from some splinters because when you're building a fence with teenagers, they aren't necessarily the most careful when they're carrying wood, and they're trying to help, and they just kind of drop things. And so I do have some good marks on my hands, but other than that, I'm doing great. Jeff, how are you?
I'm doing great. Yeah, that's awesome. You're making new fences. Good fences make good neighbors, is what they say.
That's exactly
That's
right.
awesome.
Well, we're kind of blocking a neighbor.
Speaking of President's Day, right? That's what good fences make good neighbors.
That's right. All right, so Jeff, we're so glad you're here. You're a great guy. Jeff, if you don't know, Jeff gives great hugs. Jeff's a great hugger. Every time I see Jeff, it's a big old, partly because you're like my height too, which is like we're the same height, I think. But you're stronger than me, and so
some days, yeah.
And but beyond being a great hugger, Jeff, why don't you just introduce yourself? Tell our Boggy Talk audience a little bit about who you are.
Well, my name is Jeff, and everybody knows my bride, Rachel, with the red hair, and my kids, Brody and Aria. And we've been here for a bit, but not a long bit, just a little bit shorter than y'all have. So, yeah, that's we've been here. I've been in the military. I did military for 20 years. So that's that. I was in the Air Force. So all the Army guys don't hate, please. Yeah. And we've been...
At your retirement speech, you said that's that, and that was it, right?
That's exactly how that went, because I didn't even have one. It was great. I just disappeared. I had people in my former unit like, are you retired? Like, yeah, I'm out. See ya. So now I work for a logistics company, moving things around the world, which is a great time.
You physically are moving things around the world, though.
Physically,
explain what you do.
Yes,
yeah.
I do fly airplanes that move stuff. Yeah, that's what I do. Yeah,
And like literally around the world.
literally.
Like where, are you allowed to say places you go?
sure.
On the
yeah,
internet?
all around, literally around the globe. Much to the concern of the flat earthers. It's like I keep going west and I end up where I started.
Wow.
But yeah, so Alaska, China, Germany, Dubai, all these other places, England, and then come back around. So yeah, that's what I do. Born and raised in the church, if you will. Not this church, thankfully. I was actually hopefully born in a hospital, but I don't remember that. So yeah, originally from Michigan, and then moved around with the military everywhere, and here we are, and here we will stay. In wonderful Niceville, Florida.
Lord willing.
Lord willing.
Yeah.
Lord
so
willing.
I remember the first time I met you and your family. It actually was the 4th of July. You guys came to our 4th of July picnic with your neighbors, the Williams. Shout out to Scott and Tammy.
Oh, they're great.
And I remember thinking, man, that guy is a big goofball. And I remember thinking that. And then here's my other memory is like I was drawing names for door prizes, and you guys won a prize. I don't remember what you won,
Oh,
but
yeah,
I
we
remember
did.
like oh, hey, the big
You're the
goofball
big
just won
goofball.
a big prize.
Yes, absolutely.
And when I say goofball, I mean that as a goofball, like you have an eye for other goofballs.
Game
So you're
recognizes
like,
game.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll never forget. I met James after like our second week here. He just slayed it up on the stage, and I was like, man, he just delivered a sermon that was awesome. I walked down the side. We'd never met before, and I just gave him a big double high five, and he was like, who on earth is this person?
Love it.
And it's been epic ever since.
I just like that you said the big goofball won a prize.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Well, so the first time Jeff and I had coffee, I was like, so tell me about your life growing up. He was like, I'll never forget this. You're like, well, I'm a spoiled rich doctor's kid. That's what you said about yourself. And I'm like, only child.
It's a great start.
Right? I'm like,
no,
dude, you're just embracing like.
Oh, yeah, I do have a sister, actually, but yeah.
Did you say only child?
I am not an only child,
oops.
but close.
That's weird because you said that and you deconstructed your childhood.
It's
and
so
said-
close, but not. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, okay. Anyway,
funny.
but yeah. Well, hey. So we had you come on here because we were talking through last week. I know you listen to Boggy Talk, so you're aware.
I do.
About just like, hey, keeping your vision, and specifically just as individuals. We're going to talk more about church and stuff as we go on in kind of the next few weeks, but. You know, it'd be great to hear from someone who's been in the military, who's now working, another job. Just a little bit, we're weird, right? We're pastors. We're
And a
not
goo-
normal
and a
people.
goofball. Yeah.
But like from you, just a little bit about specifically moving your family all over the world. Just how you and Rachel ensured, hey, the vision of our family's life is to follow the Lord and to prioritize each other. Just maybe talk through kind of some things that help you guys, and we'll jump in and ask some questions.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would love to say that we had this perfect vision when we got married. We hung it over our fireplace and said, this is what our family's going to be. That's not the case. We have everything from doing things our way to doing things God way and everything in between. And it's been an awesome trip. And I just have to preface it all with Rachel is awesome. My bride has been fantastic throughout. There's a lot of grace both ways, and God has been the center of the relationship, even when we didn't make it that, which is really kind of neat. Because we were yes.
I had to lean in.
Yeah,
I had to lean in to get the
Yes. So we started out 2003 is when I started my career. I got commissioned, and the very next day I got married. We got married. Rachel and I got married. And then
They give you a wife at commissioning. Is that how that works?
not standard issue.
That's funny.
Not standard issue. No, she is not military grade. She's much higher grade than that. Yeah. If any military guys are going to hear this sequence of locations, be like, oh my goodness, #blessed. What a career. Japan, then Little Rock, and then Germany.
I don't think anyone heard Little Rock. And
No.
No offense to the Razorbacks out there. But
No offense to Pixie. No offense to those guys, but yeah, that was the worst part of the whole journey, right? And that's still pretty good. Then in Germany, and then we went to Bucharest, Romania, and I had to look it up on a map too. And then we came to Hurlburt, and that's where we finished out our career. And it's like, oh my goodness, how on earth? It's like, God, not only was God saturating our lives, but He was also like, I got some good locations for you. But I will say that we got to live a vision for God. When we first started, it was how we want to do it. We're Christians, right? We're Christians in the military, and we're going to do it our way. Like, okay, here's my options. What do I want to do? With no reference to God. Like, I want to be a pilot. I definitely want to be a pilot. Here's what I want to go fly. And it was all about me and me. And what do I want? Fast forward, a few years, and it was like, okay, God, like, here are the options we have selected. Which one would you like us to go to? And then then even beyond that, how we ended up in Bucharest, Romania, we were sitting in Germany going, okay, we know we're going back to the States. Obviously, you can't have so many good tours in a row. And before we had any selection sheet at all, we're just like, all right, God, take this. Like, take this one. So going from my way to God's way. And I tell you what, ever since we did that in our maturity perhaps, I'm just like, God, take this. And it ended up being a blank sheet, and it was thoroughly a God assignment. We connected with a great community. But in all of it, looking back, we can see God's hand guiding the whole thing.
That's good. So the other night at dinner, we were actually at a dinner together, and we were talking about how really Philippians 2, which we've been going through. We went through the Sunday, how we do nothing, 2 weeks ago, how we do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit. And like how much of a challenge it is to constantly put God's will before our own will and our own ambition. And that for the normal average person, like that's a challenge, right? But like for a military person, you have to like do all the career things in 20 years. Like for us, you know, from in 40s, you're really hitting the peak of your career, right? And like you're at the sunset of your career in 40s in military. So
start a brand new one.
What would you say? And I know this is Boggy talk, right? So there's not like a clear-cut answer. But what would you say to our military guys who, you know, rightfully so, want to do well, to have influence, to provide for their family? They just have a God-given work ethic. But also that seems to conflict with commitment to Jesus, commitment to the church, commitment to their family. Like, what would you say about wrestling through that tension of ambition and career versus prioritizing God and family?
Yeah, it is a Boggy one that's really appropriate because it's really difficult to have your vision when you are literally given a vision by a unit commander. Like, here's my vision. Some other person comes into your life and says, here's my vision, and it's now yours. Yeah. And hopefully that, you know, it's all the way up the chain of command is the same, which is not always. But I will say it's when we get a vision for our lives from God, in you know, I don't want to say a perfect world, but in a good world where we're taking our lives, we're taking our careers, we're taking our marriages, we're taking our parenting, we're taking how we follow, how we lead, and we're saying, God, take it. Give me your vision for my life. It's no longer my vision. And I feel like the more I aligned with this isn't my vision for my life, this is God's vision for my life, and then assuming that, it's that concept of, God, give me the desires of my heart. I always had that wrong. I was like, here's the desires of my heart, God. I want you to give me those things. And no, it's change my heart so that my desires are your desires for my life. And so when I do that, and when I find myself even in small things doing that, it lines up the way God wants it to, with the beautiful grace that even when I mess it up, in God's economy, there's no such thing as a lost opportunity. He's like, oh, you decided to go that way? Well, I can make it work through that too. Yeah. You know, you decided to go that way? I can make it work through that too. Oh, you didn't take that opportunity? That's fine. It's not gone, just different. But to the guys in the military and the girls in the military that are trying to sort through this, these conflicting visions, God's in all of it. God's in the future, God's in the past, God's in the present. He's already in it right now. So when you're like, man, I got no option but to do what my commander says, or here's my vision for my life. I feel like I should be an expert at insert whatever career field it is. When we take that and we're just like, God, can you show me what you want in this? He always shows up. And that is to us has been the pivotal transformation that we experienced. Was instead of saying, like in our first assignments, like here's what I want to do. In the looking back on it, God was still on, yep, and I can move in that too. You haven't even submitted it to me, and I can move in that too. And so when we have these conflicting visions, nothing conflicts with God's vision when He's in it. So He can work in any commander's vision. He can work in any family vision, because that's how He saturates us with His personality. When we allow Him to do that, it's like, God, what do you want in this? He's like, well, sometimes He's like very clearly, here's where I'm going to take you. Other times He's like, go where you're going to go. Do what you want to do, and I'll be with you in that. And so when we find ourselves in assignments or in locations or in places where it's just really conflicted, like, oh man, I got to focus on career, otherwise I'm going to lose my livelihood, be it in the military or not. God understands that. He doesn't get frustrated. He's like, yeah, I'm right here with you. I got you. I'm right here with you. You keep turning your heart to God in that daily moment. I need Him every minute. Some people are like, oh, on a daily. I'm like, no. I need Him like every minute. Like when I walk out the door, I need Him again. Like,
truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were talking about really this, like how when you guys first got married, your plans, and you thought, hey, I'm a Christian, and so it'll just work out, versus really having God's vision for your life. And I think that's where a lot of people stay. Like, hey, I just pursue my dreams. I believe in Jesus, so it's all good. And I'm just curious if you, looking back, can identify, God had to do that work in you guys' heart. Can you identify some specific circumstances or people or just tools that, how did God do that? Like if you could go back and say, here's what that transformation looked like, and here's how some key things that God did in us. Here's how he did it.
Yeah. I would say habits is number one. He brought us back to him, if you will. Brought me. I don't want to go speaking for my bride. She's got an awesome life with God. And we don't have the same life with God. They're parallel, but they're good. But in my heart, it was habits. My habit was always, I'm going to attend church. Even when I can't, I need to read the Bible. I need to be involved because I was raised with that habit. So in our habits, he has transformed us. And there have been humbling moments. There's been some rock bottom moments in marriage, rock bottom moments in careers. And I would say because of that habit, those habits of I got to turn to him. Even when I was totally selfish, I was pushing God away. I was saying, nope, I don't want to hear from you. He was still there. And then when I hit rock bottom, it was like, God still does love me, doesn't he? And that wasn't my voice. That was someone else speaking that into me. And I would say it's the people you're surrounded with, with. When you're surrounded with people that love God, he will speak truth into your life through those things.
So kind of transitioning here, now you're in a role where you're gone about half the time, right? I mean, I know there's some flex in that.
Yeah.
I mean, literally around the world. So habits get broken regularly. And then you kind of jump, and I noticed this about you, and part of why you have you here is you do jump right back in, but I would say habits with God, habits with your family, with your kids, habits with your wife, like with the people, those get broken, you have to do it. So kind of how have you maintained like the steadfastness in the midst of kind of what's a little bit of a chaotic life for you in this season?
I read a lot of C.S. Lewis. Honestly, there's a lot of I read a lot of books. I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I actually listen to Boggy Talk, and then I'll re-listen to it sometimes. I'll download it.
Hear that? Listen to it twice.
Listen to it twice, definitely.
Is that because you're fact-checking?
Yeah.
If you listen to it backwards, you might get secret message.
Like the Wizard of Oz. Yes.
Some kind of stealth message.
Oh,
Stealthy,
man.
stealthy.
Yes. Attend church regularly. It comes in there, yeah. Jumping back into it, like you're talking about, you may see me. I may not actually remember it because I'm still working with a sleep cycle that doesn't exist. But I will say,
you find that's really hard at this stage of life too.
The older I get, right? The older I get. Somewhere around 40, it just hit me in the face. I was like, man. I mean, you guys are young. But
Justin's the old man at this stage.
I think so. I think I may be the oldest. I may be the oldest.
So because we just established I'm a year or two older than you.
Okay, so yeah. All right, you're in the middle.
I'm right in the middle. So but getting back to that, like honestly, my answer is going to be habits again. But it's really going to be the habits of where I go when I'm tired. Mm-hmm. Where do you go when you're tired? What do you do when you're just like, I'm exhausted, I don't want to do anything? That right there, in any life pattern that I've found, what do you do when you're exhausted? And I've got some apps on my phone that will read scripture to me as I fall asleep. Like simple thing. Read that chapter of the Bible, and when it's done, it goes to sleep, and it's done. And like saturating yourself in the Word as far as a habit goes is probably the best thing I could recommend. Because what happens when I come back is I go to my habits. But I will say that there is a lot of intentionality. I have to structure my sleep and my travel when I come home. Like I know when I come home, I have made the choice. I pre-decided that I'm going to get to church. If I land here at 6 a.m, I'm still going to church. I'm going to do my best. There are times it doesn't happen. I'm just like, I love you, honey. I'm going to bed. Like I'm literally going to pass out because my body quit. That happens. But the default is that I know I'm going to attend the church. I'm going to attend things that my kids are got going on. If it's a concert, if it's a performance, if it's something else, that's a yes. And I'm thinking of several different books again. And I go back to C.S. Lewis. One of his quotes is that good and evil operate on compound interest, which is why every little decision you make matters. Because you are investing in eternity, or you're investing in yourself, or you're investing in not eternity with every little choice you make. And so I try to keep that at the forefront of my mind. Like, all right, the next 10 minutes of my life, I get to choose to blank. And, I'm not always good about that. I'm not very good about that. In fact, like there are times it's like I'm turning my brain off. I'm going to go do blank, whatever. But coming back to that cycle and that rhythm of what we saturate ourselves with, who we spend our time with. What is it? The saying, your personality takes on the traits of the 10 people you spend the most time with. Well, you two are actually, two of those people. So hopefully, those people that I spend that time with, what is my mental and emotional diet? What do I listen to? Who do I pay attention to? That I think crafts a lot.
That's why Justin has become more salty. He's been spending all this time working with me.
Oh man! Has he started?
I edited those moments out of Boggy.
Has you started listening to P Diddy or Taylor Swift?
Dude, I listen to anything, man. Oh, that's really funny. So I have a question. So as you retired from the military, or you exited the military, and you were. You guys were like, what do we do next? You finally had this opportunity. I mean, you had some input into your military career, but a lot of it's determined by other people as well. But you, for the first time, were like, we get to do whatever we want, whatever we decide. And I think there's a lot of people in our content here in this community who have just recently or about to be in that stage. So how did you guys, now with this desire to God's vision for my life, not just my vision for my life, how did you guys approach that decision about where to live, what job to take, and really influenced by God's vision?
Yeah, that was a hard call. That was a difficult call, but it was also an easy call. See, the military has given me a specific set of skills, and that was operating airplanes. So it's like that was a very narrow skill set. I ended up applying to multiple airlines and going to the airline road. But before that, probably 2 or 3 years before that, we sat down and said, we are approaching a fork in the road. The very obvious answer for most military pilots, a lot of military pilots said, I'm going to keep operating airplanes. I didn't want to just be like, that's the assumption, that standard assumption. And I spent a lot of time in prayer when we were actually in Romania about that. And that is one of those ones where I heard a very clear answer from God and through my wife, through the church that we were attending. God's like, really? You can take this any road. I would consider myself lucky for getting that answer. He didn't say, you know what your future is? Your future is going to be driving the trash truck. I'm like, okay, well, if that's where you want me to go, but we're going to have to move. But yeah, a lot of time in prayer. In that particular case, I identified a time in my day was my commute, and I could listen to a podcast, and then I could shut it off and just listen to God, which was really hard, especially in Bucharest traffic. But it was really neat because he showed up and just kind of spoke to me in some quiet tones there, and some of the things I would hear throughout the day just made it like, look, man, you're stressing this decision. I was stressing it pretty hard. Stop it. I'm there. Just listen to me, and it's okay if you go where you're going to go, and you just want to go do that. I've got you. And it was not a straight line. It was not a straight line at all. I worked at a couple different places. I worked at a staff in the military and career dead guy who got passed over, ended up in a different military unit. But it was that I keep going back to habits, but that habit of, all right, God, and it's become stronger and stronger the more I use it. So it's beginning my career. It's like, what do I want to do? And now it's like, what do you want to do? And it's been a very long road on that. But that's how we navigated that. It was years, literally years of trying to hear the right answer in that decision. It was tough. So.
Well, man, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing. And I guess I would just kind of ask, last question for you is, if you have anything else you want to say to the Boggy Talk faithful, you can hold your comments for the unfaithful later. Actually, I was thinking a Reformed podcast, they probably call their listeners the unfaithful, right? Anyway, because they do that shit like, "Oh, come all you unfaithful." There's a song. It's actually pretty good. But anyway, so we call our followers, right? Listeners, what are they called? Subscribers?
I don't
friends.
know. Friends. We call them friends.
The Boggy Talk faithful. And what would you just kind of say to summarize all this word of advice?
Oh, man. I would love to say that I've always knew what to say if I could get a microphone put in my face, and here I am for the first time with a microphone in my face. Jesus loves you. You can hear his voice, and he has good things for you. It's not a prosperity gospel, but he has very good things for you. lean in. When it's hard, when it's complicated and confusing, lean in, listen harder, and he will talk to you. If you ask him, he will talk to you.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good word to end on right there. Thanks, man. But what great wisdom from you. So I wrote down as you were sharing habits, humbling moments, and other people. God using the church, God using the disciplines that we enact in our life, and then unfortunately we do have to walk through humbling moments when we maybe screw things up or just not listened and done our own thing. But God humbles us in those things. So, man, thanks for that good word.
Well, thanks for having me here.
All right. So we can answer some questions, or we can save those questions for next time.
Let's go with the he gets us. That's
all right. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll do one question. We'll save the next one for next time, just for time. But here's a question we received. What do we think about the He Gets Us campaign? All right. So if you're not familiar with the He Gets Us campaign, this has been going on, I think it started last year during the Super Bowl, and then there was another ad. It's been an ongoing advertisement, and then there's a website. And then specifically, the ad that aired in this year's Super Bowl was somewhat controversial amongst some because it depicted people washing other people's feet in specific scenarios. And then the tagline was Jesus doesn't teach hate, he gets us. So what do we think about that? So what do you go ahead and then I'll follow up.
Jeff Bliss, what do you think about it?
I think there's a lot of missing context.
Okay.
There's a lot of missing context there, that Jesus had a relationship with his disciples, a rabbi, a teacher, a leader to his disciples. And in that context, him doing that was way out of line for what was normal in the time. So and these are a bunch of men who are going, I should be washing your feet. That attitude is totally missing from that commercial.
That's good. Yeah, I mean, I think I think the answer is nuance. So So I think about like the people who are just like so angry about it. I'm like, well, what about like holding John 3:16 up, right? Like at a game, right? Like that's not the full story. Like for God so loved the world, he gave his one only son. Whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. Okay, well that verse doesn't talk about repentance. It doesn't talk about the next verse, So like, is there something inherently wrong in just like holding up Jesus loves you, right? Because that's not the full gospel message. I think like you can't like in an ad necessarily walk through like the whole like gospel message necessarily, right. So I do think like chill out a little bit, people who are super angry, but also at the same time, like I think this just reveals like the reality of where we're at, that there are those who are behind that ad who are saying things that are misleading, right? Like they're not really giving the full gospel. There is some liberal agenda, behind it. I mean, most of the people depicted washing feet again, where who you perceive as conservative, and it's trying to say, hey, they should wash feet, and so, man. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So I posted something on social media. It was like, he gets us just to give that perspective, but I do think there's some value of having quick, simple ads with a link to get people to follow and then hear the full gospel. Mm-hmm. I do think that. But the roots of the He Gets Us movement is definitely, I mean, like if you follow it, it's kind of more of a progressive Christianity, intentionally or unintentionally. And so I think the criticism is valid in that standpoint, but then the criticism isn't valid of like, do we really have to get into full like Apostles' Creed on a 30-second Super Bowl ad?
That's right. Yeah, I'm with you. I think so much is missing in the context. And granted, it's an ad, so you can't give context and nuance everything. Right. We can't even do that in a 40-minute sermon on Sundays and not nuance every situation. I think a context is key. Is one of the things we were talking about with our kids, because the commercial came on and they were like, "Oh, did you see that?" So we talked about it. It came on again recently in something we were watching, and we were just trying to help them understand like, here's what they're trying to do. And while I think like that the commercial itself would play really well at like a Christian conference or to help people like understand like, hey, we're called to serve people on in a scale like the Super Bowl or other ads. Like what I think probably was the end result was more Christians being offended and more so the people who were depicted as the ones having their feet washed being like, yeah, Jesus doesn't teach hate. And it gets communicated as this tolerance and acceptance of all things more. And granted, Christians should serve and wash feet of all people. Like we're not arguing that. Like we should, you know, like Jesus tells us that. Like, you know, we're to serve love our enemies, like all those things. But it's just you can't fit the context in it. And also, Christians don't be so easily offended.
Yeah, I think we don't like that word hate, but God hates sin, you know, and I do think I think part of like the vitriol is the reality that this is another step towards like the denial of the wrath of God, and the wrath of God is real and repentance is needed. And so repent and believe. And so I just think that what's interesting is I had actually several non-Christian friends on social media who were offended by the ad because of how much money was spent.
Yeah.
So I was like, and they were mad at conservative Christians. I was like, this is so funny because like I've got my somewhat liberal non-Christian friends upset at conservative Christians about this ad. And then I got my ultra-conservative Christian friends upset at liberals for this ad. I'm like, what? You know, and on one hand, that's like Jesus, right? And the other hand, it's not like Jesus. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, that's why I don't really like church advertising. Like,
it's hard.
Yeah, we don't do a ton of it here, you know, and I think that's part of it is because you keep people with what you reach them with, right? And so like what we should be reaching with them is a person sharing the gospel with them, according to Romans chapter 10. So anyway, I get it. I'm not mad. I didn't see it and throw my TV, you know, because then I'd have to buy a new one. I'd be really upset about that. But like, you know, anyway, I don't know. I don't really have anything else to say. He does get us.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I saw someone post like, he's going to get you. And I'm like, that's probably not the response.
A little bit
like,
different.
That's probably not the good ad. Like turn or burn, like the devil, go to church or the devil's going to get you driving up on I-65,
Love that.
right? Like, That's probably not good either.
Yeah. What would Jesus do? He'd probably turn off the TV.
Yeah. That's a great quote. All right. Well, we should close with a Mount Rushmore since we asked
Mount
Jeff
Rushmore.
to do a Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
So I'll start. How about that? And then we'll let you guys finish here. So our guests, you get to go last and you get to, you know.
Giddy up.
So we did our presidential moments for Mount Rushmore.
Because
it was President's Day yesterday. And so my 4 most memorable presidential moments are as follows. First, when I was there, when Lincoln gave the Gettysburg Address, it put chills on my spine. No, I'm going with things that I remember. The first one I actually technically don't remember because it was like 4, but it was played so much when I was young, it stands out. And that was Ronald Reagan saying, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." So, and you know what ensued after that? Man, it was just so good. You know, I mean, you know, Mr. Gorbachev, right? Tear down this wall, right? Yeah. So, anyway, so that was big, and just the end of the Cold War and all that stuff. Number 2 would probably be, truthfully, when y'all gonna laugh, but when Donald Trump, you're like, what was memorable about Donald Trump?
Skipped a couple.
I was driving home from, am I going chronologically? Oops, I did. Oh, well, I messed up the chronological order because I don't want to end with Trump. But whenever he was talking through COVID in that press conference, we were driving home from Nashville and I was so mad, but I felt like he captured like this. He was frustrated, but also didn't know what to do and was trying to make the best decision. And I just felt like, actually, that's very presidential to say, I'm making the best decision with what I know right now. And like, even for Trump, going against his instinct, because his instinct was don't close anything down, right? And so I felt like it just helped me a little bit in that moment because I was so mad, you know, that we were shutting the world down, you know, because anyway, so I thought he did good with that, you know, and then he would start saying stupid stuff after that. But number 3 would be Obama after the Charleston Methodist Church when he spoke at the funeral and he sang Amazing Grace and just the emotion. And, you know, I disagree with a lot of Obama's politics, as do many people, but that dude is a great statesman. And he had a lot of good moments, but that one in particular, and I mean, Amazing Grace, singing Amazing Grace, the president singing Amazing Grace in 2000 and whatever year that was. And number 1, is post 9/11 George W. Bush. Because, dude, he was just the man for the hour. And could you imagine if Al Gore was president when that happened, right? Because, that would have just, anyway. But Bush, and just specifically that night when he spoke, I think it was that night or the next night when he spoke, in the chamber. And I think there was something already scheduled. And so they just did it anyway. And there's so many great moments, him throwing out the pitch, all that post 9/11. So passing it off to you, Justin.
All right. So we had, I love how you mentioned Obama and Trump so that you could offend both sides, extremes of our Boggy Talk listeners. So
Antichrist.
That's right. So two of mine were the same. I was old enough to actually remember the, Mr. Gorbachev there on that wall. I mean, I was like 7, but I do remember we watched it in school, and played it over and over again. So that was one of, and then the post 9/11 George W. Bush, just the initial speech. I was actually overseas during 9/11 in South Korea, so it actually hit very differently because we weren't here to experience the feeling of being in the States. So, but watching that and just that was probably when the gravity of it really hit me. Just watching him and watching that speech. So. Two others, one is related to Obama, but it's not, that's a great moment. I just remember when he was elected the first time, this was a historical election, the first African-American president. And I just remember, again, I don't agree with any one president on anything, but so definitely differences there, but huge respect for him and just what that meant for our country. I think it was a great moment. And then the other is not really, it's more of a pre-presidential moment but it's seared in my mind. The election of 2000 when George W. Bush and Al Gore, and so the reason this was in my mind is because I was actually in Richmond, Virginia at the International Mission Board training center, and this group of 100 other people who were being commissioned to go overseas and serve, and we were watching the election results together, and it was really interesting because people would assume that with the IMB, the SBC, everyone is super conservative, but there were a significant number of people who really wanted Al Gore to win that, and so there was camaraderie, but also tension in the room. And then it wasn't even decided because of the Florida hanging Chad.
Right. Oh, the hanging Chad.
The hanging Chad moment. And so it wasn't decided for officially for a week. And so I'll just never forget, and I was, 21. And I just remember being so my world, I just was wow, Christians disagree on a lot of things, but they still love each other. This is amazing because it's not necessarily the environment he grew up in. So
that's how I hear your voice when I think of 21-year-old Justin. Too. This is amazing.
The male voice isn't mature until it's in its 30s.
It's a late puberty thing. It's okay. It's okay.
All right, Mr. Bliss, you give us yours.
All right, so I got a couple in parallel with you guys. The first one I had was G-Dub 9/11. That was very, very much seared into my mind. Waking up in a dorm room and finding out we're under attack, and then the next day it's getting to watch the I think it was that very next day, getting to watch the president address. Hey, here's what's going on. But seared into my mind is the picture of G-Dub reading to a bunch of kids, and he has a Secret Service guy whispering in his ear, and he's holding this book upside down. He's got that book. He's you were not reading that book, were you? But yeah, that just kind of seared into my memory. Before that, actually, is George H.W. Bush. This is when I 8 or 9 years old, so probably 9 years old, and then watching the beginning of hostilities in Gulf War I. Just where I was, I just remember sitting there war? We're at war? Is Dad going to make it home alive from work? The irrational fears of a 9-year-old kid. But that's definitely seared into my brain. Then I do have an Obama memory in there, but mine is thoroughly different than him being elected. Mine was the background. So 2015, he made a historic visit to Kenya. And at the time, I was stationed in Europe, and I had to do, in the office that I was working, I had to do the support for that event. And I got to see firsthand for 3 weeks how much goes into that guy crossing an ocean, that office crossing an ocean, just how much, I was interfacing with probably 10 different countries. I had all these federal agencies, some of which I never knew existed before. But the amount of support that moves with that guy when he moves is absolutely amazing. And so I had.
You just totally trumped us there.
Oh, you're welcome.
No pun intended.
No, it was Obama, not Trump. So that's just here. Those 3 weeks, sleepless weeks of work that went into that it was really cool to be a part of that. And then the last one I have was actually a COVID memory. So after the lockdown happened, there I am watching for the first time this production called Hamilton. Those who haven't heard of it, go watch it. I'm watching this show, and in the middle of the show, they introduce George Washington. And never has a U.S. president been introduced with so much pomp, hip-hop, and circumstance. It was so cool. I was like, I want to learn more about George Washington. Does that count as a memory there?
No, but that's okay. Justin breaks the rules all the time.
right.
Yeah, okay.
And now we're all singing Alexander Hamilton.
I haven't seen it yet. George W., the real one, George Washington, is my favorite president.
Oh.
If you read about it, it's just
awesome.
I know that some do, but I don't think we appreciate his willingness to not become a king. How he changed the world by his humility, is really pretty cool.
Really, really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking of changing the world with humility.
What a segue.
Hey, we're curious. What are your presidential moments? Boggy Talk. Let us know. But hey, Jeff. No. James says no, we're not. We want to know. So we're going to get some text about that. But Jeff, thank you so much.
Yes,
for being you, and for Rachel being Rachel, and your kids are they're great. Brody and Aria, we love you guys, and are so thankful that God has you here. And it's great to hear from you just how God's been faithful, how He's been working, and how He's continuing to work. And we just pray. For you, for us, for all of us, that we have God's vision as our vision. So thanks for everything you shared, and Boggy Talk. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Boggy Talk. We are so glad you joined in the conversation. Go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss a beat.